Hey everyone, Sid the Future here, and today we're going to take a little look at two VSTs and how they compare, which is something I don't do that often, but I got a message in a synthwave producer group where someone posted the VirtualCZ that is currently discounted on PluginBoutique, to which I responded, well, I already have the Arturia version, so why would I want this version? And some people said it's actually very good, very light on the CPU, which is always nice to have, and very cleanly programmed. And also it comes with a whole bunch of patches, which is also a very cool thing, and it's dirt cheap. So that got me kind of interested in how does it compare to the Arturia model of this synthesizer. So just let's start off on the pricing thing. This is the deal right now. So this is in euros. This is also with included VAT and all that sort of stuff we have here in the Netherlands. So your pricing may differ a little bit, but let's say 15 bucks, 14 and a bit. Usually it's 48.60 compared to the Arturia offering, which is 149 bucks. Now, I do have to say that the Arturia pricing is a bit weird because I wouldn't really advise buying separate synths from Arturia. I would just always advise to just get the entire bundle, at which point it's a little bit hard to say how much every individual synth costs, because that's completely up to how you value them, really. But yeah, just for comparison's sake, this is the offering from Arturia, this is the offering from PluginBoutique. Another minor side note is I haven't actually done this experiment, so we are in this together, I guess. Let's see what happens. Oh look, there's an update. Excellent, but not now. Alright, so let's start off with one thing I was wondering. Can we actually do an easy comparison here? As in, could we use the same patches? And someone on the Facebook group actually mentioned you can actually load sysex files into these things, which is pretty awesome, because that means you can actually not only move patches between these two virtual versions of the synthesizer, you could actually load real CZ patches into these VSTs. So I want to play around with that a little bit, see how that works. And I'm also curious to see, Arturia has these custom lines you can draw in. I'm curious to see what happens with that if we are going to move it to the CZ. Future me here, let's just pause quickly. You can't actually export sysex files from the Arturia CZ-V, so you can't export to the VirtualCZ or to a hardware CZ synthesizer. Alright, let's carry on. So that's a little bit of the premise of this video. Face value, let's start there. We have the Arturia, which of course has the giant Arturia interface with a lot of frills and stuff, versus the rather mundane looking VirtualCZ. I would say you know where the money is going with the Arturia stuff. I really dig the way the Arturia interface works. It's very visual, you can really see what is going on, you can see things move, you can see the lines move underneath, you can see the envelopes move, you can see the modulations move. Everything here is visual, which is really cool. And on the CZ side, yeah, it reminds me a little bit of the 90s or something. Very basic, but let's not knock it on the way it looks. But I can already say it's going to be easier to program sounds on the Arturia side. That being said, there's a pretty big price gap, especially right now. So it might still be interesting to get the CZ. So for this specific thing, I have loaded the same patch. This is actually a patch from the CZ, which I exported as sysex and imported into the Arturia version. So let's see what happens. This is going to be a pretty testy thing, because I tried to phase invert, cancel them out and stuff, and it didn't work at all. And I actually don't think that's the most useful way to test it in this case. So let's just use our ears for now, and I have this little specto thingy running down here to have a little bit of visual feedback as well. So here we go. VirtualCZ. Alright, one big difference is that the virtual is running in poly, where, the Arturia is running in poly and the virtual is running in mono. So that's not entirely fair. So let's just... Okay, so there is a difference you can definitely hear if you listen really closely with the VirtualCZ on the longer notes. You can actually see it in the metering as well. You see it bouncing up and down a little bit with the Arturia. It's rock solid. It's also a bit noisier in the upper register. Hey there, Future Me again. So this is apparently due to the DEC emulation that Arturia is doing in the VirtualCZ. So you can turn it off, and if you do that, all the noisiness disappears. Alright, carry on. So that's at least one sound, and I would say just on face value they are pretty similar. I want to get some very different sounds in here as well. Now that's very different. I'm not going to bother you with the entire thing you have to do here, but you have to basically save it as a sysx file. And in the site you can actually import successful, and now it's imported on the Arturia site. Then you have to actually select it. There we go. So it's not really easy to just batch load all the presets from one to the other, but sort of works. Alright, so this is next sound. I would say that's slightly different, but still pretty much same-ish enough. It seems like the Arturia version is always a little bit buzzier, so this might actually be a CZ DEC thing. Yeah, there we go, that's the big difference. Yeah, see, now we're getting more into a same-ish realm. Alright, so that's interesting. So the noise you see here is actually Arturia modeling in the amplifier from the CZ unit. So they have probably sampled a few CZs at different volume levels and kind of mapped in the noise. So that's the difference you see. So for sake of comparison, I'm actually going to leave this function off, as it seems to disrupt the results a little bit. But still, it's very much in the same ballpark. Now I have found some interesting sounds in here as well, so I'm going to do a little bit of diving, a little bit of... Alright, so now we can do this. Let's just do a C. Alright, so this is a really big difference. It seems like there's a lot of stuff going on up here that the Arturia just isn't doing. So now I wonder what is causing this behavior here. Now another downside is that I don't own the actual CZ, so I can't really say which of the two is more accurate, but just going off this one preset, it does seem like the VirtualCZ is actually doing some stuff. So up here there's some resonance going on. is completely missing in the Arturia version. Still sounds good, but it definitely sounds very different. So there's an interesting difference already. So I'm going to see if I can find another one of these more complex sounds. Feature me again. This is the part where I try some different sounds to see if there are similar big differences. And I'm going to skip past this because it just makes the video a lot longer than is necessary. So I skip right to the reason why the sounds are so very different between these patches. Alright, carry on. Now actually, to completely level the playing fields, I should be able to import the SysX here as well. So now we really level the playing field, because now I've loaded the alien here and in the Arturia version. So it's both with the SysX output. And this is interesting, because this might mean that there's actually some information not being sent over SysX. So let's get back to that morpher sound here for a second. We're onto something here. And now they are identical. So that means that the VirtualCZ is doing some stuff that the actual CZ can't do. So when you export it into a SysX file, you lose that functionality. And therefore it can't be imported, of course, into the Arturia version. Even though it might be able to actually replicate the same sounds. So just for demonstration's sake, you can of course put a chorus on the Arturia CZ-V and you will get pretty close to this sound, but I wasn't able to exactly nail the chorus that's going on in the VirtualCZ. It's anyways a very interesting chorus, and I tried to contact the developer to ask what kind of magic is going on there. But no answer yet, but if I get an answer I will send an update out on YouTube. For now, let's just quickly compare the VirtualCZ with the morpher patch versus the Arturia CZ with the chorus activated. So here we go. So yeah, these high harmonics here are definitely something that's pretty different. I tried some different chorus models, Tel chorus, some Valhalla stuff. I wasn't able to exactly nail what's going on here. Still though, if you listen to the overall sound, it's actually fairly close. And I think that if you're going to put this in a mix, it's going to be close enough to not be all that noticeable. But do notice that it seems like the VirtualCZ does have a pretty interesting chorus effect going on. So let's try it the other way around. Actually, while we're on it, let's just take one of my presets. Alright, let's take this one. So let's export the preset. So there's the catch. You actually can't export the Arturia stuff. So you can import SysX files, but you can't export from Arturia. So we can't actually test it the other way around. So that's good to know. Very interesting. So now I wonder what the CZ can do that Arturia can't do. Because that's now the question of the day. The $1 million question. There we go. So it's the chorus and effect settings which do not get exported. So if I were to add a bit of depth, this is going to be a complete guess because I don't actually know the values of this because it's a percentage. So let's just go 50-50 and let's see what the hell is going to happen. The interesting thing is once you remove the effects, they are suddenly very similar. So this chorus which is going on in this CZ is doing something very specific, which causes that little flutter thing to go on. So you would have to know the exact settings of the CZ chorus to get that same effect. So I think there might be some actual truth in the fact that the VirtualCZ is actually more accurate. So this was a little bit puzzling, but apparently the Casio CZ-101 and 1000 do not have a built-in chorus, although the later CZ-3000 series does have an analog chorus built in. The chorus featured in VirtualCZ has two modes. The first mode is modeled after the Roland Dimension D, and the second mode is modeled after a, CZ style chorus, so it's probably not going to be exactly one-on-one. This is indeed a pretty specific feature, not only for the VirtualCZ, but also for the synthesizer that Arturia is trying to recreate. So it makes sense that the Arturia side does not have this feature. That being said, it does make a pretty big difference in sound, so that's a very interesting difference. So the VirtualCZ is a little bit more nasal here, where the Arturia is a little bit more throaty. So yeah, there's definitely differences between these two synthesizers. So I'm not going to say which one is more accurate, of course. I'm in no position to do this, but there's definitely a difference between them. Although a large part of the sound difference seems to be in the chorus on the VirtualCZ side, which does some pretty interesting stuff. There is a bit of a tonal difference between these two. Now, in sense of, let's grab our CPU meter just for the sake of it. So we're resting slightly higher, well, quite a bit higher with the Arturia one in rest. Not even a tenth of a percent CPU usage. So that would be around 3 times more CPU usage, although in all fairness it's both pretty low, and the difference between the two is in race in CPU when used is approximately the same, so that's not giant. If you're using a few of these patches, if you're going to duplicate the instrument like 20 or 30 times, that's going to matter, of course. I would say, yeah, let's see, Arturia CZ, so the bottom one, we're going from 0.2 to 0.25. And virtual, we're going from 0.01. We need to activate it. .009, so the raise is slightly higher. Still, we're talking about sub-percentage usage. I would say that's pretty negligible, even though, yeah, sure, virtual is more efficient. I would say the visual feedback of the Arturia is worth those tenths of a percent of CPU usage. But if you want to do 15,000 tracks of this, I guess you're better off with the VirtualCZ. Still interesting. So these aren't 100% comparable, which is something, well, I expected them to be a little bit different. But the difference is not so much in the synth itself, as in the basic patches. There seems to be a pretty substantial difference in that chorus, especially, where some magic happens. And the fact that you can't load Arturia sounds in any other synth, so you can't actually export Arturia files into your CZ, where you can export the VirtualCZ sounds. That's actually a big plus. So if you are a CZ owner, you could actually patch it on this easier interface and then just export it to your CZ, or you could use this as a library for your CZ sounds. Interesting findings. Yeah. So is there a difference? Yes, there is. Is there a big difference in just the pure synth sound? Not that much. Is there a big difference in the processed sound? Absolutely. Can they both load sysx files? Yes, they can. So which one of these would I recommend? I'm going to say it depends a little bit. From a patch making perspective, I would say the Arturia CZ-V just takes it with the easy to use interface. And you get a bunch of Arturia effects, which is always nice to have. However, if you're just looking for a CZ-V sound, you want to be able to load patches from, for instance, the patch bay or something like that, I would say the VirtualCZ definitely does have everything you could want for a CZ simulation. So that's it for this video. If there are any questions, drop them down below, and see you around.